What up, Raffalitos? Welcome back to my channel. We are back at the national park. This is a national park. The entrance is a national park. And this is Albert Street. And what they did recently was they rebuilt this bridge. You've seen it, I think the last time we were here was around Easter in April. And they had just completed this bridge. And I think they were working on the rest of this road. So what has happened since then is I think they completed Thomas, that's Thomas Road, looking towards Camp Street. Thomas Road ends at Camp Street. And they had resurfaced the road. I think we talked about this in previous videos. Built a sidewalk, but it's inconsistent. There's no gutter, for example, between the sidewalk and the road. Right? There is no gutter between the sidewalk and the road. And what happens is that the water, of course, pools. They try to implement something at the other end, doesn't work. But here's what they're doing in the other half. So this is the half from Thomas Road, from Vlissingen Road to Albert Street, where we stood a few seconds ago. So they're again rebuilding the shoulder, right? They're basically putting in, it's not a retaining wall, but it's supposed to serve the same purpose. So they're putting in a retaining wall here along the side of the, in other words, on separate the trench, the canal from the road, and to keep it from constantly washing into the canal. They're doing the same thing on both sides. In fact, the same as they did at the east or west. That's the western half of the same Thomas Street. So they're basically completing the job of rebuilding this Thomas Road. Right? This is the other side of the street here. And that's the national park. Now, what I want to do in this video is to show you what's happening on the other side of the national park, but I thought I'd start here by showing you what's happening on Thomas Road. On the other side of the national park is where they're building the Hilton Hotel. And somebody wanted to know what's happening with the Hilton Hotel and why are there delays. So we're going to go over there and take a look at Hilton, the site for the construction of the Hilton Hotel that's being built by the Assets Group from Qatar. But here, this is what is happening on Thomas Road. They started working on it, on the shoulder, on rebuilding the shoulder, and they've gotten as far as the second gate here at the National Park. And so they've started working on the shoulder, building some kind of retaining wall. That's what the retaining wall looks like. Here it's just like some corrugated zinc that's backfilled with cement. And that cement is eventually turning into concrete that is going to hold the shoulder together. They still haven't worked on this side, east of the second bridge here to the National Park. But as this project develops, we're going to see more and more of it. And like I said, it's probably going to be exactly the way the western end of Thomas Road was built. And we also looked at that in previous videos. They've put new gates on the National Park, and they've put this, what is it, corrugated steel plate in the gate. It says Protected Areas Commission. So that's what it's saying on the circular cutout. And I suppose that's some area. But this is what it looks like here. Still working using some, what's it, earth moving machines here. 2 Caterpillar excavators working here on the grounds of the national park. I have no idea what they're doing, what exactly they're doing, but that's what's happening. So what's happening with this new Hilton Hotel as we take our walk around the national park? One of the reasons why I'm coming in this late is because it's been raining on and off so frequently during this rainy season that I have been unable to go out early, get my run in the morning because if I get up at 4 o'clock, which I normally do, it's raining, and it's nothing like being out there in the dark and it's raining, or you can't see the rain coming. You'd be, running along nicely, and then suddenly you're in a downpour. So that's why I haven't been coming out earlier in the day before dark, and why I'm basically making videos later now, and in the evenings in some cases, as you've seen, trying to catch the golden hour light of 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But here's the point: the Hilton Hotel is stalled because the land on which it's being built is still in dispute. Right? There is a dispute between the central government of Guyana and the city government of Georgetown over the ownership of that land, and it's a political issue, right? Because the political parties that run the government, that basically is the leading the government, has um, one set of ideas about how to develop this country, and the other political party, the opposition parties, have another idea about how to develop the country. And the city of Georgetown is actually under the leadership of the opposition political parties. They don't, in other words, although the government was won, the national election was won by the PPP, the local election, city of Georgetown, Region 4, was won by the coalition government. And so there is disagreement at the level of the local government, at least in Region 4, about what to do with the land here. This is the new exercise facility donated by, I think it was CNOOC, the Chinese oil company. Morning. And it's quite a good addition to the national park. I always promise to come out here and use it, do some pull-ups, upper body exercises, but I haven't been able to do that consistently. I guess it's one of those things I can add to my routine. But yeah, so the issue is that the local government that runs the city of Georgetown is a different political party, the opposition to the party that runs the central government. The problem with that is that they disagree in principle on how to develop the city of Georgetown. And the land that is under dispute has been basically confiscated by the central government and given or leased or sold to the Assets Group, which is a Qatari investment group, to build this hotel. Morning. Good job. So they didn't consult with the local government. The central government did not consult with the local government of the city of Georgetown, the mayor and city council, in other words, about how to use this land. They basically confiscated what is referred to as recreational lands, just like this national park. The lands north of the city, morning, have been reserved, morning, have been reserved for recreation, right? These are recreational lands. Morning. And what the central government is saying, look, is we don't need permission. We're just gonna rezone this place and build what we're going to build. The local government, the city government, that is the mayor and city council, is saying no, that's not how the land is utilized. This zone is a recreational zone. So behind this green fence, that green fence on the other side of Carifesta Avenue, is where the Hilton Hotel is going to be built, or is supposed to be built. Right? It's along Carifesta Avenue. At this end, there used to be the Guyana National Service ground. National Service was one of those civil organizations that was set up by President Burnham to um, to educate and train Guyanese youth in the preparation for citizenship. It was basically an organization that trained people to defend Guyana as a paramilitary organization just in case Venezuela attacked. Right, so you had the People's Militia, which wore brown clothes. This was back in the 70s and the 80s, 1970s and 1980s. So you had the People's Militia who wore a brown uniform, which is another paramilitary organization. And then there was the Guyana National Service, where the members of Guyana National Service wore green uniform. Now, this is back in the 1980s. In the 1980s, I was actually required to do a stint in the Guyana National Service because I was considering going to Germany to study. I was offered a scholarship to Germany. And back in those days, if you were going to study abroad, you were required to do a stint in the Guyana Nationals, like 3 months, I guess. I think I spent 3 months. I spent 3 months in the Guyana National. So you were required to do a stint in the Guyana National Service because it was thought that it would inculcate values of citizenship and loyalty. In other words, they expected you to return to the country and not stay away. I'm not going to cross. I think I'm going to cross this little bridge here, but it's not stable or sturdy. So I'm going to have to walk around to see beyond those fences. I'm trying to get to see what's going on behind that green fence, see what's happening with the Hilton Hotel. Last time I was there, there's nothing happening. They were just moving earth, basically filling the ground with, building up the ground, because all of this land is below sea level and they need to actually bring it up to about 6 feet, maybe 7 feet above current level that it's at, to be at sea level. And so they're trucking in dirt, earth from around the country to build up this land behind that green fence. But yeah, as I was saying, the story of the Guyana National Service is that this is an organization started by former President Burnham to prepare young people to fight for Guyana in case Venezuela attacked. So I was required to go to the National Service, and back then there was 3 months of basic training. So it was similar to basic training in the Army or the military in the US, except that instead of 2 weeks of basic training, it was 3 months. And in 3 months of basic training, you underwent training in weapons training, what they call them, pokey drills, and marching. You know, you had to be able to march in formation. And it took several months, actually. It took at least 2 months to get a company, you know, together to march in unison. Because in the beginning, people are out of shape, people are fit, unfit, and so on. Calisthenics in the morning, you'd wake up at 6 in the morning every morning and muster. This is the pond in which there are these sea cows. Right, these are the sea cows in the. Let me see if any of them are awake at this time of the day. I think we've seen them in the previous video. The water is always murky, it's never clear. I don't see any snouts above the surface of the water. Oh yeah, there's one. I can see a tail. See, there's a tail or a body. See if you can see it there. There's a body of a sea cow just above the surface of the water. Back. I don't know how many of them are in here, but I gather there are a few of them, at least a family of them. But yeah, so the National Service was supposed to provide training in drills, weapons training, and agriculture. So back then at Kimbia, I spent my training, my basic training in the Army, in the National Service at Kimbia, actually, which is about what, 90 miles up the Berbice River. It was a long ride on a boat up the river. Took, I think, overnight. You'd leave around 8 p.m. in the afternoon from New Amsterdam, and you wouldn't arrive until the following day at noon or afternoon. So it would take almost 20 hours to get there. But yeah, I went to National Service there and learned, I think in that day, they had these guns that they trained us on were pretty ancient. I think they were SLR rifles, real heavy, um, British rifles. And I think there was a GPMG, a machine gun. Morning, morning. That you had to lie flat on the ground to use. I think I used that. We used that one for marksmanship. Oh no! I think we just tried. We were just introduced to the GPMG, which was the machine gun at that time, for rapid fire. Don't know how many bullets it unloaded a minute. Something like a couple hundred bullets a minute. It was more like 3 to 5 bullets a second. It wasn't really fast. Anyway, so that was weapons training. That was Ghana National Service. Fast forward to 1992, when this current government won the election and they abolished the National Service. So an organization that was supposed to be preparing young people, I think you had to be 15 or 16, because when we were up there, we met some young people who were like kids who were like high school dropouts, or parents put them in the National Service. So if you had a bad kid that you couldn't control, parents would put you in the National Service and so on. So there were kids who were being trained by or taken by the state and being trained in things like agriculture and paramilitary training and so on. So the National Service actually served a purpose, but the current government, the PPP, was against it, and so they abolished the National Service. And what that means is that for several generations since 1992, young people in this country have not been occupied gainfully in learning to defend the country. Right? So there was a time when a lot of young people who were aimless high school dropouts who had no focus in life would go to the National Service because they'd get, 3 square meals, a place to live, and a small stipend. And they would be maybe at the end of, a year or so, have skills that would allow them to find employment in the society. So when the current government eliminated Ghana National Service, what essentially they did was they eliminated one of the important social organizations that took up the slack. Right, this is the Borough School of Art over here. This is the exit from the National Park, and we're here because, we want to see what's happening with that Hilton Hotel location. But this is what's happening here on Carifesta Avenue. They're still working on building these drains. All right, they're building drains so that eventually they could widen the shoulder of the road, make this into a 4-lane highway. They did it already on the other side, right? They built a sidewalk and they covered the drains, to create a sidewalk. And they're doing the same thing on the other side. So this on the north side of the Carifesta Avenue is what they've done on what they're doing on the south side. In the distance, that's Marian Academy. That's a private high school, no, private school. I think there's both elementary and high schools in the same building, same complex. And straight ahead of us, just ahead of us, is where the government reclaimed land from the Guyana National Service. So that was the backstory for the Guyana National Service. The government of Guyana, the current government, the PPP government, abolished the Guyana National Service. So since 1992 or sometime shortly after that, they disbanded this paramilitary organization that provided training in weapons and paramilitary training, discipline and so on, especially for young people who would now be able to have the skills, although they would be no longer in the national service, they'd be living in society, doing ordinary things, but they would be like a reserve army, similar to the People's Militia, which was another paramilitary organization that provided weapons training to citizens. So I said I got that weapons training during my stint at the Guyana National Service. So this is what is happening here. As you can see, there's water on the ground. Now I don't know if, because it's raining, this is the rainy season, right? This is the rainy season in Guyana. And this is looking inside the compound. This is where they're supposed to be building that Hilton Hotel. Now this part of the land was reclaimed or confiscated from a high school. The high school is St. Stanislaus College. St. Stanislaus College is the high school that they reclaimed. The government seized this land from, and this is what they're building. Right, they're building this hotel, and of course, it's being built by Assets Group. The Assets Group is a group from Qatar, and these are the pictures on the side of this fence showing us what the hotel looks like or will look like. Right, it's just an artist representation of what the hotel is likely to look like after it is completed. This is the picture of what it looks like on the inside. This is what it should look like on the inside. This is one of the corridors and the halls. This is a bedroom. These pictures are all now getting quite dirty because they're out here in the on the land where they're building stuff. So this is what the Hilton Hotel is supposed to be when it's completed. The problem is, of course, that the land is below sea level and has to be built up. So let me see if I can show you what's happening over this fence. So I don't think I can see over the fence here. So behind this fence is the land that is being prepared for the Hilton Hotel, but the land is below sea level, and so it has to be built up. As you can see, because of the rainy season, the land is actually flooded. There's water on the land. Morning. And Yeah, yeah. The land is flooded. I'm sure we can see it from the other side, uh, from the seawall, because the seawall is actually several feet higher than the land. But yeah, this part is the National Service part. So behind this fence, this was the entrance to the National Service ground, and this is what it looks like here. This is what the land looks like. You can see in the distance, way in the distance, that's the Pegasus Suites and Corporate Center, Pegasus Suites. But in the foreground here is where they're building the Hilton Hotel. And what they've done, it seems as if they've been excavating the grounds here, right? Based on, I can see water. See, there's water on the ground. So there might have been, all this earth that they're getting is from excavating, from digging up the ground. See, there's water on the ground again in the distance. But as you can see, not much is being done except for moving earth around on the ground, on the land. And the reason why, I think this was the end of um, this fence here, what we're looking directly at, was the end of the National Service part of it. And of course, beyond the fence was St. Stanislaus College, which is the high school ground. Now, St. Stanislaus, I think, was given replacement land to replace this ground that they've used, that the government has confiscated. St. Stanislaus College received land at um, Homestretch Avenue. And the National Service that was removed from this location, that is, the land that was confiscated, was not given land anywhere else. And so the dispute is the government has confiscated this land from the Guyana National Service, has disbanded the organization that had an important function, right, an important role, the Guyana National Service. Again, this is another entrance to the Guyana National Service uh, land. So the government basically confiscated this land from the Guyana National Service. There was a clubhouse here. They demolished that pavilion. There was a football field here. That football field now is underwater because they basically excavated the land, taken earth from here to build up other parts of it. Right, basically destroyed what was an institution wholly and completely, because not only did they disband the organization in the 1990s, so we no longer have young people who were trained to defend Guyana with the kind of paramilitary training that I had. I mean, I was an 80% shot as a marksman using an old SLR rifle. I could hit a target at 100 meters 8 out of 10 times, right? And I actually picked up those skills in the National Service, the Guyana National Service. And back then, even I didn't realize I needed glasses. Now, of course, I'm wearing glasses. And my sight is a whole lot better than when I was a teenager. I think I was about 18 at the time when I was in the Guyana National Service. In 1988, yeah, I was 18. So the government has disbanded the Guyana National Service, and the government has also uh, confiscated the land. So you have an organization that is now completely erased. There is no other place. So this land was actually recreational land, even though it belonged to the Guyana National Service. People would come in here to play tennis, table tennis, in the clubhouse building for the National Service, the pavilion. People would come out to play football on the pitch, football field, and so on. So all of that has been confiscated, but the facility has not been replaced. They have not assigned replacement land for what was confiscated from the Guyana National Service, and people still use that land. People would come out here at Easter time in April to fly kites, and this is not just on Easter Day, but you know, any day. It was recreational land where you could come and find some space to spread out with your kids, have a picnic, or have a day out with your family. And that is what has been lost. And that is what is being challenged in court. Does the central government of Guyana have the authority to override the city government in determining the use of the land? Now, you're hearing all kinds of partisan arguments about that, what the government can do. But it's not about party, it's about the law, right? And that's why it has to go through the courts. What does the law say about the jurisdiction of the central government when there is a local government that manages the facility? So what will happen in the future, who knows? Depends on the election, the outcome of the current election. Election coming up in September. If the current government wins, I think that dispute goes on. The government is actually trying to build a new city, Silica City. I haven't shown you Silica City yet because from the pictures I've heard and seen about it, I am not yet impressed. But we'll get to it eventually. Then eventually when, of course, the central government moves to Silica City, Georgetown, the capital city, will be still under the control of the local government. And the question is, should the central government, whether or not they live in or occupy the city of Georgetown, determine how the land should be used and how the city should be maintained, and override the city government's jurisdiction? That is the issue that's being worked out in the courts. And it's not a partisan issue, it's a law issue. It's an issue of law. What does the law say? Right? And it has to go through the courts and has to be resolved before construction can begin here at Carifesta Avenue on these recreational lands. So that's the issue as far as I understand it, guys. Now, I don't have the details because, of course, the matter is not in the courts and the government has not been releasing any information. Typically, when these kinds of court disputes are being conducted, there's a gag order and nobody's allowed to discuss it. So that's the situation. That's Zappy, the children's playground in the national park in the distance. That's the long and the short of it, guys. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe. But that's the story of the Hilton Hotel, why the Hilton Hotel has still not been started. The construction hasn't been started. Construction seems to have been stalled. Now, people have asked me about the Hyatt Hotel, to give you an update on the Hyatt Hotel. It seems as if that construction has also been stalled. Well, every time I go there, it's in the same state. For the last 3 or 4 months, we've been visiting the Hyatt Hotel in Providence. And every time I go back to it, I used to give you an update on that hotel every time I go to give you an update on the bridge. But for the last several months, every time I go to look at the bridge and the hotel is in exactly the same state as it was. And the bridge, well, the bridge has been moving rapidly along. But that's it, guys. That's what's up. That's what's happening. I'm going to give you an update on the Hyatt Hotel once I find out why it's stalled, why it is that every time I go there, it's in the same state. Although I see a few people, workers on the site, the work site, the guards on the work site, but the progress on the Hotel Hyatt was not visible. You can't see progress being made. So I'm going to find out why that is happening and give you an update on that in the next video. But for now, this is what's happening in Georgetown, Guyana, the fastest growing economy in the world. I'm going to give you some other updates, what I'm working on. Presently, I think there is a drive for health, a men's health drive in Guyana. Talking about prostate cancer, I think this weekend there's going to be a free screening for prostate cancer. I think they're using the blood test for, what's it, PSA test. I'm going to go and participate in that. I also scheduled to do an MRI at one of the local hospitals here. It's part of Men's Health. 75% of the viewers on this channel, subscribers are men. 25% are women. So I'm going to start bringing you some more information for men's health. And like I said, some people have asked me to do an update on what it is like to retire in Guyana. And I also want to do a series of videos on the reality. I've always said that if you want to retire in Guyana, the thing you have to prepare for the most is healthcare because we have an undeveloped healthcare system. But I'm also working, one of my companies, or several of my companies, are in healthcare. And I'm going to give you some updates on what I am doing to make the situation better, to build better healthcare, to bring the standards up to international standards here in Guyana. But that's what's up, guys. That's what's coming. I still haven't gotten around to doing the deep dive into the Ambanis and India's global impact on Guyana, the role of billionaires. I promised that at the start of this season. Season 17 ends in June, so hopefully I get around to giving you those videos by the end of the season. If not, then they'll roll over to the next season, which starts in July. But that's what's happening here as you approach Camp Street, Camp and Carifesta, and straight ahead. So if you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe in the comments below. Tell me what you think. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Let me know what you think about the closing of the Guyana National Service and the confiscation of land and the stalling of the Hilton Hotel, construction of the Hilton Hotel by the Assets Group. What do you think about the dispute between the local government and the central government? And what do you think about the future of Guyana, given the election cycle coming up in another 2 months or so, in September 1st. Share this video with friends and family. Let people know what's happening in the fastest growing country in the world, Guyana. Later!